When you think of a city like Los Angeles, you think of population density, not a lot of green spaces. And when we start to change our perspective and start to see spaces and the potential that these spaces have, you realize that many systems and types of infrastructure for composting can actually take place. When it comes to small scale composting within the community, there are many types of systems to choose from. My personal favorite is no system at all and just a pile and the ingredients you need for a compost pile to thrive. But there are many cities, counties, and municipal agencies that offer free or perhaps even subsidized bins for you to start composting on your own. These are in the form of plastic bins that require individual users to lasagna layer their compost ingredients, which we'll get into. There are wire bins, which are great at allowing airflow for you to be able to water and aerate the compost piles. Tumblers are very popular in regards to choosing the system because they are elevated, they are off the ground, they prevent the unwelcome guests from getting into the system, and they typically work in a batch system. Here at LA Compost, we use a lot of the 3-bin systems, which you see on this slide here. We established community compost drop-off locations all throughout the city. And these 3-bin wooden systems really allow for easy drop-off, turning, cooking, and curing, all within a concentrated area. At the end of the day, it's really important to recognize that composting is a spectrum. You have to recognize how much organics are you generating, what space do you have available, what does your time look like, and be realistic with your ambitious goals. The last thing we want you to do is burn out or not to participate anymore because it became too difficult. I think, like I mentioned earlier, the beauty of composting it is very forgiving. You never ruined a compost pile beyond repair. Another favorite compost pile on this small scale are worms. Great with kids, great with families, can eat practically their body weight per day when in proper environmental conditions, require cool shaded areas, and are also bins that are subsidized or given away for free across different cities, counties, and municipal jurisdictions across the country. My personal favorite and the system that we see at a lot of parks here in Los Angeles are simply covered piles. And we're going to be talking about worms and windrows soon. But I think the beauty of just a covered pile is it's the entry point to participate is low. All you need is space, a pitchfork, a hose, and some ambition to want to participate in the compost process. And you can get started. For those of you working with small bins, the process is very simple. I like to refer to it as cooking or baking a cake. You are gathering ingredients. You are creating optimum environmental conditions for something to happen. And similarly, that's what's happening with compost. It's not our turning or our watering or its placement in the sun. It's the microbial life within the pile that are really allowing for that magic and decomposition to happen. So if you're setting up a bin in a small park, a small community garden, or even in a front side or backyard, you want to select an area that is close to a water source and ideally close to shade. Here in Los Angeles, we don't have to worry about our compost piles freezing over. We have to worry about our compost piles drying out most of the time. So if you have a shady spot, if you're close to a water source, that's wonderful. When we talk about composting, we're talking about the ideal conditions. We want to establish a solid moisture level. We want to ensure that there's proper airflow, and we want to ensure that our main ingredients, which are carbon and nitrogen, are readily available. When we talk about compost, we often talk about food scraps and the nitrogen that they provide in our piles. But equally as important are our carbon inputs, which come in the form of leaves, twigs, mulch, cardboard, unbleached paper towels, things of that nature. And as I mentioned, the learning is in the doing, and perhaps just like a recipe that's been passed down to you, you make improvements, you make adjustments, and over time it keeps getting better. And the same is true for your compost pile. The typical instructions are within a lasagna layer is browns and greens equal to volume. Browns representing our carbon content, our greens representing our nitrogen content. I think it's always safe to add a little bit more browns, a little bit more mulch, a little bit more leaves to retain that moisture, to cap any odors, and to cover exposed food scraps. Turning is optional in a backyard system, but I think one thing to to make clear are the expectations you set early on. If you have raised bed gardens that you're hoping to fill with your compost bins compost, I would look elsewhere for a source of compost. What you create from your compost bin is going to be absolutely phenomenal if you follow the proper recipe, create the environmental conditions, but the volume is going to be decreased and reduced greatly from the original content. Turning your pile allows for airflow, allows for temperatures to change, allows for microbes to really engage with all the full spectrum of ingredients. As material breaks down, depending on the size of your pile, the pile might heat up. If it's a small backyard bin, it might not, and that's okay. As I mentioned, there's a spectrum of composting, and regardless if it heats up to 130 and 140 degrees, or it's just staying at ambient temperature, there are inner workings. There is microbial decomposition taking place, and at the end of the day, you are going to get something of value. As I mentioned earlier, there are much lengthier informative books, videos, and workshops to attend in regards to small-scale composting, but my biggest encouragement is that you just try something. The learning is in the doing. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn as you go, and if you're doing it in community, you have those that you can lean on, look to for support, and just coexist well during this learning process. Knowledge sharing is ideal. It's not a competition. It's the collective action that matters, and we simply want you to participate.